Hi there, Reuben here for Native Instruments, and in this walkthrough video I'm going to be looking at how to produce an orchestral sketch with libraries from Cinesamples. I'm a pretty big fan of this developer and have even made a couple of previous composing videos all about using their orchestral products, so look those up if you want even more inspiration. In this video I'll be showcasing some of Cinesamples' classic libraries that have been part of my template for years, and also looking at some of their newer sketching tools. Some of these products are new to the NKS shop, such as Deep Percussion Beds 1 and 2, Hollywood Winds, Forbes Pipe Organ, and CineSymphony Lite, and I'll be hanging the bulk of my orchestration on these libraries. I'll also be featuring parts from other popular bread and butter Cinesamples libraries, CineBrass Core, CineStrings Core, CinePerc, as well as a couple of patches from Tina Guo Volume 2 Solo Cello and Randy's Prepared Piano. Before I break it down, here's the complete track. So first, a little about the concept and workflow for this piece. I wanted to put together a modern take on a Western cue, so think lots of soaring strings, brass leads and pounding percussion. A broader range of acoustic instruments often characterises music of this type, in addition to a more traditional orchestral palette, so I used a few more esoteric patches. These include a pipe organ, glass marimba, piano metallics and even the sound of a typewriter. More on all of these as I go along. I'm calling this a sketch only in so much that lots of the tracks have been live played into my DAW, Logic in this case, and I haven't gone back in and finessed much of the orchestration, panning, levels or dynamics beyond my natural playing. Having said that, because most Cinesamples libraries are recorded in the same space, the Sony Pictures scoring stage, they work really well together out of the box. I don't really need to get into too much detail when editing, except for maybe quantizing shorts and making sure that the various instruments aren't competing for one another's space. With this in mind, you'll see plenty of sections of this piece where one instrument hands off the melody to another, or different tracks share the same rhythms. I'll try and point this out as I go along. So let's take this piece track by track, and I'm not going to go too deeply into what each different library does, as I've looked at that in previous videos. But for each track I'll show which patches I've used and how I've tweaked the sounds to suit the cue. Beginning with CinePerc, the industry-leading percussion collection from Cinesamples. This glass marimba has a ghostly timbre already. I've selected a custom mix from the many different soundstage options, using the overhead and room mics with a little touch of close mic for definition. I really love the sound of these rototoms, a pitched and modified version of a regular tom drum with a distinctive sound. This CinePerc patch has lots of different pitches and articulations, including single hits, flams, roughs, and rolls with mod wheel dynamics, many of which I've used here. CinePerc also features a wealth of unusual percussion toys, including jugs, washboard, buckets, whistles, ratchets, flower pots, and in this case, a typewriter. You can hear this mechanical sound throughout the second part of the cue, masquerading as a kind of metallic shaker. You can even catch the dinging bell if you listen carefully. Again, I've used mainly room mics to prevent the tone from being too upfront, but also a little close mic to reveal the transient character of each hit. The 3 tracks I just mentioned are really incidental to the bulk of percussion programming compared to these 3 tracks. Cinesamples' deep percussion beds 1 and 2 are a really simple way to get authentic percussion performances into your own music. As you can hear from the NKS previews, these are loops at a variety of time signatures and tempi, although they can all be stretched or squashed to conform to your project's BPM. With Deep Percussion Beds 1, most patches have several different loop performances with combined low, mid and high instruments, and also split out into stems playable on different keys. The concept's taken a little further with Deep Percussion Beds 2, and there's hundreds of brand new loops here. Again split into stems but also chopped into playable hits on the lowest green keys, so you can play in your own rhythms if you prefer. Throughout the cue, I've mixed and matched various stems from the 2 libraries to keep things interesting. I've also snuck in some additional percussion on this track from CineSymphony Lite. This brilliant sketching library has this really useful percussion patch with all the most commonly used tonal and atonal instruments mapped across the keyboard. It's a really unfussy way to grab essential elements of percussion and live play them in. Tubular bells, bass drum, snare, tom, shakers, woodblocks, cymbals, tambourine and glockenspiel. These are all instruments you can find sampled in much greater detail within CinePerc, the full library, but it's nice to have all the basic articulations in one place. Let's hear the percussion elements together. Moving on, I'll look at a couple of the other CineSymphony Lite tracks, Strings and Woodwinds, and these feature simple short and long articulations, triggered by velocity in this case, although this can be customized. These are full ensembles, but the samples of each instrument section are stacked, so that you can set up the playable ranges for each, where one section blends into another: bass, cello, viola and violin in the case of the strings. It's also possible to use the inbuilt chord arranger feature to automatically build additional parts with new notes, based on what you're already playing, in variations of light, medium and heavy. In this cue, I've used mod wheel dynamic expression to shape the sound as the main riffs swap back and forth between strings and woods. You'll notice a few gaps where the CineSymphony Lite strings or woods drop out, and that's where our dedicated libraries step in. CineStrings Core, Hollywood Winds, and some parts from CineBrass Core. CineStrings Core has fundamental orchestral string section techniques split into separate patches either by instrument group or articulation. There are also some combined patches, like this trill and tremolo ensemble, where the articulation is chosen via key switch. I've also used a violin patch, where control is handled by velocity and sustain pedal position. This first section combines spiccato, staccato, and legato, but you can map articulations in almost any way you like using these extensive mapping options. It's a similar technique with CineBrass Core, containing all the most used solo and ensemble patches for orchestral brass writing. The first section plays sustains, and the rest is short eighth notes. Using the mix curated by legendary soundtrack producer Dennis Sands. This track is reserved for a gorgeous legato solo trumpet, playing melody lines often accompanied by strings on other tracks, a very familiar technique throughout Western-style movie music. A quick mention for a classic Cinesamples library, Hollywood Winds. I think this must have been one of the first orchestral sample libraries that I ever owned, and I still rate the tone and playability. There are lots of useful tempo-synced motifs, along with playable patches, and of course you can preview all of these with NKS. Speaking of motifs, I've used quite a number from Tina Guo Volume 2 Solo Cello. Cinesamples' masterful recreation of this musician's virtuoso playing styles. I was spoilt for choice when it came to picking phrases, all playable in multiple root keys. With a bit of onboard reverb dialed in, they slot right into the cue. The other solo cello track uses playable articulations from silky smooth arco to spiccato and even sol ponticello. I've switched on infinite bowing just here, which gets rid of any bow change movement. Now in real life this isn't very realistic, but I needed it for the long sol ponticello note. There's a part of the cue where you can definitely hear a kind of metallic, plucked string sound, a little bit like a banjo. Since Cinesamples doesn't currently make a banjo, I transformed a prepared piano patch from Randy's Piano. This library has a wealth of weird and wonderful sounds, and this one fits right in with the Western theme. I've carefully tweaked the mic positions, added some reverb, and also Native Instruments Replika delay to ping-pong the delay around the stereo field. Soloed, you probably wouldn't be fooled that it sounds anything like a banjo, but in the context of the track when doubled with strings and woods, just maybe. 2 final tracks now, featuring one of Cinesamples' newest libraries, Forbes pipe organ. This is a meticulously sampled church-style organ, featuring multiple registers and lots of ways to apply sound design layers and effects to the combinations of pipes. Have a listen. In this cue, I've used a patch that pulls out all the stops, quite literally. And there's another that uses a dreamy designed preset with soft tones and a wash of diffused reverb and delay. A quick note about the mastering. As this is just a sketch, I've used Ozone Pro's Master Assistant to inject some vintage processing, EQ problematic frequencies away, and compress and maximise the signal up to modern levels. The clever Master Assistant listens to the audio and applies suggested processing automatically, so it's a great option if you want to get a quick and easy idea of how a pro mix could sound. So that's my track, and you can see what a huge sound just a few Cinesamples patches conjure up. These are super playable libraries with a wealth of instruments and articulations. I hope you've enjoyed the breakdown, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.